Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 22nd day of November in the year of our Lord 2024. I will be talking today about the decision of President Biden, or the decision of whatever cabal that runs this country, to authorize Ukraine to fire U.S.-made ATACMS missiles deep into Russia with only about 60 days left to serve. The president has to work fast to get the United States into a nuclear confrontation with Russia. That, I suppose, will be his legacy. Please remember that next week is Thanksgiving week, so no Castle Report that week. I plan to spend some time with family just catching up, giving thanks for another year. I hope you will do something similar. I will start by giving you a quote from Dennis Kucinich, who had the best take on this decision. Quote, when President Biden approved the use of supersonic Army tactical missile systems, or ATACMS, to strike Russia, he placed in jeopardy the national security of the United States, the safety of our troops abroad. He violated the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, which provides that only Congress can declare war. Biden has made a decision to insert the U.S. into an unambiguous escalatory phase, using the territory of Ukraine to attack Russia directly with missiles which can reach 190 miles deep. This is an illegal act by the president, which puts our nation on a path to war with Russia. The American people voted for Trump to end the wars. Biden apparently wants to end the world. Trump is listening to the American people. Biden is listening to NATO's malignant agenda, end quote. Yes, apparently President Biden has decided, or someone decided for him, that the best memory the American people could have of his time in office should be that he started World War III. I don't see any way to view this other than a direct attack by the U.S. on Russia. I hoped and prayed that I would live my entire life without experiencing war between two armed-to-the-teeth nuclear powers. So I suppose we are left with holding our breath for 60 more days, praying for the forbearance of Vladimir Putin. This is reminiscent of the last time the U.S. and Russia stood toe-to-toe with nuclear war as a distinct possibility. In October of 1962, Russia placed offensive missiles just 90 miles from the U.S. border. The world was on a path of nuclear annihilation. Absent the wisdom of John Kennedy, the forbearance of Nikita Khrushchev, he could have launched those missiles, and Kennedy could have refused any accommodation to Russia, but cooler heads prevailed. Kennedy's legacy was assured. It's difficult to think of Kennedy today without remembering those dark days. What a difference 62 years makes. In 1962, the world was literally living in terror, hoping and praying that no nuclear missile would land in our cities. We dug shelters. We put blankets over our windows to protect us from flying glass. Now the American media hardly even notices that the U.S. is using American missiles for direct attacks into Russia, thinking, I suppose, that it can be done without any consequence. Trump made peace one of the primary facets of his campaign and subsequent election, but Biden seems willing to do anything, including provoke nuclear war, to subvert the efforts of his opponent from achieving peace. Congress could and should act, but I doubt that it will do so for its own reasons. But its failure is a glimpse into how far we have fallen. No president has the right to unilaterally order a missile attack against another country, using only executive authority to do so. It invites and begs for a retaliatory strike against the U.S. and/or its foreign assets. It should be, and it is, an impeachable offense, but Congress will ignore it because, well, that's what they do. Did Biden use the excuse that North Koreans are training inside Russia as a justification of this decision? To my knowledge, the presence of North Korean infantry in Russia has not been officially confirmed, but it appears to be the case right now. If so, then Russia is simply doing the same thing the U.S. and NATO has been doing to Russia since this war started back in 2014. Biden has, for his own political reasons, passed on many opportunities to end the slaughter and the destruction. That destruction includes some 500,000 dead on the Ukrainian side, the destruction of 80% of the infrastructure of that country, Russian casualties are largely unknown, unconfirmed, but there are undoubtedly a lot of them. I've seen reports that Russian casualties are amassing faster than recruiting can replace them. The Ukrainians have started resorting to what amounts to press gang tactics to find fodder for the gristmill. One commentator I read said that Russia is losing, but Ukraine is losing faster. Let me pause this discussion for a moment and talk about this missile system the U.S. has authorized Ukraine to use against Russia. This is the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, ATACMS, a supersonic missile with a maximum range of about 190 miles. That range means it can hit many important targets in Russia, which has already happened, but it cannot reach Moscow from Ukrainian territory. So we have that going for us, right? Well, no, I'm afraid not, folks, because the UK, France, Germany are all on board with the decision and have authorized Ukraine to use their Storm Shadow missiles for attacks into Russia. The Storm Shadow is an air-launched cruise missile with a range of about 300 miles, which puts it most likely into Moscow. So it appears that the U.S. and NATO have decided unilaterally, and for no good reason, to go to war with Russia. Perhaps the decision is as crass as damaging Trump's presidency by giving him a chalice of poison to start his administration. Biden also agreed to supply within the next few weeks or months, depending on availability, joint air-to-surface standoff missiles. These are air-launched cruise missiles with a huge 1,000-pound warhead and a range of up to 575 miles. In the extended range version, 260 miles in the standard version. In addition, the Ukrainians will be receiving U.S.-made anti-personnel mines, apparently to be sewed inside Russia, to kill anyone, man, woman, or child who steps on one of those for many years in the future. That makes me extremely sad, embarrassed that an American leader would do that, but there you have it, folks. One more thing to let you know that this Democrat administration loves war, is dedicated to death and destruction. On November 20th, just a couple of days ago, the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate, unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. I don't know, folks, but even I didn't understand just how evil the people in charge of this country really are. These two wars are forcing us to confront some very uncomfortable truths about who we really are right now. The Russian nuclear doctrine has just been changed to reflect, quote, the use of Western non-nuclear rockets by the armed forces of Ukraine against Russia can prompt a nuclear response, end quote. This has already happened. Since Biden's authorization, U.S. missiles have successfully hit targets inside Russia. I'm trying to find the words to convey my thoughts of how egregious this is, so let me do it like this. Suppose the U.S. and Mexico were essentially at war, but the war was confined primarily to the border region, but with heavy casualties on both sides. Russia then makes a grand international announcement that it was supplying long-range missiles to Mexico to be fired at the U.S. with the use of Russian satellite targeting data. The nations of China, North Korea, and Iran decided to join the Russians by supplying their own even longer-range missiles. I presume the U.S. would assume that it was at war with those nations. The new administration has spoken, just not through Trump, at least to my knowledge. The president's son, Donald Trump Jr., had this to say, quote, the military-industrial complex seems to want to make sure they get World War III started before my father has a chance to create peace and save lives, end quote. On the other side of the sanity spectrum, Alex Soros, son of George Soros, when he heard the news, said this, quote, this is great, end quote. Not everyone thinks nuclear war is great, however, because Hungary and Slovakia both voiced disapproval. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico, who halted Slovakia's military aid to Ukraine when he took office, quote, this is an unprecedented escalation of tensions, a decision that thwarts hopes for the start of any peace talks and an end to the mutual killing of Slavs in Ukraine, end quote. Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó had a strong rebuke to Mr. Biden, quote, the pro-war mainstream has launched its last desperate attack On the new reality, these forces seem to have no qualms about the worst-case scenario, escalating the war in Ukraine to a global scale, end quote. He went on to say that politicians in Washington were launching one last desperate attempt to thwart the will of the people. So it seems that these gentlemen are right. And despite a clear rebuke from the American people, the defeated Biden administration, however it exists currently, is trying to ship as much money and weapons to Ukraine before January 20th as possible. Russia has made it very clear that it considers this to be an attack by a nuclear-armed country against Russia. The nuclear policy just announced reads like this, quote, aggression against Russia and its allies by a non-nuclear country with the support of a nuclear state will be considered a joint attack, end quote. So it seems that a nuclear response from Russia could come at any moment, thus plunging the world into the abyss. The Russians have repeatedly warned us that they will respond, and yet this man did it anyway, for no apparent reason other than raw provocation and leaving Trump with a world on fire. This is, then, a major turning point in the long post-World War II struggle between the Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation, and the United States. For the first time, and for no apparent reason, the U.S. is attacking Russia itself. This should be an emotional decision for all of us. We should be screaming to Congress about it. It was doubly disturbing because it was not his decision to make. This vindictive man just decided on his own to subvert the will of the people, so I suppose that's what all the Democrat talk about, quote, our democracy was about. I suppose that's what all the talk about he's a fascist, he's literally Hitler was about, just like Saul Alinsky taught them in their guidebook, Rules for Radicals. Do what you accuse others of doing. The American people elected a president who pledged to bring the Ukraine/America versus Russia war to an end, so Joe Biden wants to make sure that pledge cannot be fulfilled. Joe Biden has crossed a Russian red line that will be difficult or impossible to uncross. He has only a couple of months left, and he decided to take the world to the brink of nuclear war. Yes, his administration has been a complete and utter disaster, and the mandate given to Trump reflects that. It was not his decision to make, but he made it anyway. It could end up having catastrophic consequences for every man, woman, and child on planet Earth. So yes, Mr. President, that's quite a legacy you've made for yourself. This is the classic story of the change in American politics over the last few decades. In more civilized times, the outgoing party respected the wishes of the people, as expressed through the election, so they would do nothing to injure the chances of success of the incoming party. Now it seems that the outgoing party wants to make it impossible for the incoming party to fulfill its agenda. This amounts to ideological sabotage of the efforts to make peace. The Democrat Party should consider changing its name to the Party of Forever War, which would be more accurate than Democrat. Finally, folks, it appears that Trump will be a war president, perhaps a world war president. I pray that he sees withdrawal from the wars as an act of courage, not one of cowardice. At least that's the way I see it. Until December 6th, then, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.